So just gonna guide us in 10 minutes of landing here in this space. From where you're coming today. Maybe you've driven, maybe, it's a little bit of stress still in the system, coming here, making it on time, and, meeting a lot of people. And starting by, becoming aware of the body, sitting and breathing in and breathing out. Just gonna check, is there anyone here who has never meditated before? Could you indicate? One person, okay. So maybe I'm just gonna quickly say that, meditation isn't about having a different experience from the experience you are having, but it's about really connecting with that, with a sense of interest and a sense of stepping a little bit back, and having a sense of perspective. Just how are you feeling right now? Whatever it is, excited, tired, confused, relaxed. And just being aware of that. So rather than losing ourselves in our experience, we are having the possibility to know what is happening. And sensing the weight of the body on the cushion, on the chair. The gravity of the earth, which is gently keeping us in place. Becoming conscious of that. There's other, places where there is not that same gravity and be a very different experience. And whenever your mind wanders into thinking about something, just gently bringing it back to the body and allowing the breath to take you into the body. Even, with the out breath, letting go of any stress or tiredness, letting that go into the earth underneath where we are sitting right now. So letting it all drop down, coming into the body from the head. And with the in-breath, we can maybe connect with the stillness, the stability of the earth, and breathing that up into the body. Landing, arriving here. And maybe, sensing the hardness where the body meets the chair, the cushion. The quality of stability, hardness, structure of earth element, which we can also, sense in the teeth and the bones, the fingernails, the toenails of our own bodies. So that's just a way of arriving and, attuning our system to this vaster system of the earth, which helps us to slow down. And, I think I mentioned that last time, and I want to say it again, times are urgent, we need to slow down. That's a very well-known saying by a teacher called Biography, Nigerian. And I think that's a very important consideration, because it's a paradox. And if we start to look at life, in this more deeper way, looking behind the surface of experience, there we find a lot of paradox there. So times are urgent, we need to slow down. With everything, which is happening in this country and on the planet as a whole. A small version of what's going on here is going on in my own country, in Austria. And I think in many other countries. And the confusion, the uncertainty, the unsettledness which comes with all of this. Meditation isn't about escaping from that, but finding a grounding in the midst of it all. So we can get a sense of perspective and shift perception of what is really happening. So I'd like to, speak to that today. Perception being one of what's called the 5 aggregates. And, the Buddha speaks about perception being empty of a self. And we can shape it. We can take it into our quote-unquote hands, make it a practice to work with perception, because it can be trained. And it can be freed from the cultural conditioning of our current paradigm, which is obviously starting to show a lot of cracks these days. So the limiting conditioning of modernity needs to be also made an object of investigation. So the bigger picture, within which we are swimming all the time, and we can make that conscious. To make that conscious in order to live up to our true name, human. The word human literally means earthling or made of earth. Humus and human have the same root. So we are, made of earth. And our work lies here, as long as we are embodied, as long as we are not fully awakened and need to have a body and are born here, we need to work within the limitations of here. And that, is very urgent to consider these days, because we are caught inside of a culture which is all about wanting to get over there. It's all about progress, it's all about speed. And kind of, we have forgotten where we come from and how we got here. And what the rules are of living on a planet like this. The limitations of having an earth body, which need to be understood and presented, in the systems we build and the way how we relate. So, being conditioned inside of a paradigm which is all about overcoming limitations and endings. And now we've kind of hit the wall, it's no longer really holding the promise it once had. And more and more of us start to get concerned, hey, this really doesn't seem to work. So the central logic of the paradigm of modernity, that there is endless growth, that this is possible, is showing up as a wrong assumption. And that throws us back directly onto the core tenets, of the Buddha's teaching, speaking about impermanence and unsatisfactoriness, of trying to find solutions in the material world in that extreme sense. As modernity is trying to do it. So I think that's at the core issue, at the difficult social and political and ecological situation we find ourselves. The disrespect of limits and the disrespect of mortality. And really, looking inside of ourselves, how much we are also, of course, influenced by this, but we have been conditioned into it, and we can take this teaching and peel layer by layer of this condition and peeling it back and composting it and freeing it up from this dream of endless growth. So, what if we start to look at endings and limits not as something to be overcome or as an obstacle to be overcome through technology, but look at it as that's the way it is, that's the rhythm of life. That's one of the three characteristics. Not just, in our own private, emotions and mind states, but also in terms of the cultural paradigm we are living inside of, sometimes quite unawares. So stepping outside that box and looking at it and seeing, oh, this box is cracking up right now. It's no longer holding what needs to be contained in a cultural paradigm. It needs to be able to relate to reality. And it obviously doesn't. So it's a powerful contemplation to directly, ask ourselves those questions. Not in a way, to blame or polarize, but just from a sense of concern and care for this world, this beautiful planet, and all who live here, not just humans. So to apply the teachings to these very big questions is a possibility to bring a sense of meaning and a sense of agency into our lives. We are not victims. We are participants, of this vast process, which, we can call it evolution. And, through really taking in the fact that our bodies and the greater body of the planet or the biosphere are one and the same process. And there's a relationship going on, even it's quite unconscious for our species still, because we were like trying to dominate and control it. That was a, more immature stance, and now we are shaken out of that into the next evolutionary stage of our species, from adolescence into adulthood, going through this initiation, which is kind of a bit scary and dark, confusing, and that's the function of initiation, to enable the individual, but also, in our case, a whole species to compost something which is no longer up to the job, really. Growing out of that into the next level of more maturity and accountability, relational accountability, and letting go of this, the individual bravado of the patriarchal hero figure. Which is, giving way to a different paradigm now. And we can accelerate the process by becoming conscious of it. And, bringing up that generosity in ourselves to allow the unsettledness, to allow the uncertainty to change us, to rewire us on a deep level. Even if it's scary and we don't know, how this emergence is going to pan out, really. But we can rest assured, that this system of planet Earth is doing this since over 4 billion years, and it has always kind of known how to preserve life. So really looking at this in a big picture, really opening up the lens. Directly, working with perception to gain a sense of perspective. Taking it all so personal. That can help us, to hold all of the difficult emotions which get activated. And community, being with others together. We are all together in this. And we can support each other to stay open. Bring a sense of inspiration by seeing ourselves as part of a long lineage of humans, and also the lineage of Buddhism, which comes to us from Iron Age India. It's over 2,500 years old, and these bodies are, they started to emerge about 2.5 million years ago. So bringing together these ancient intelligences and becoming part of what needs to be understood and integrated. And not wasting time by going into polarization. And preserving this sense of agency to do what we can to protect and limit harm. So that's something, which is within reach, because we have this powerful teaching, which gives us a handle on these minds and these hearts of ours, to liberate them, increasingly from the limitations of what doesn't really work. So we can train perception. And, I'd like to share with you a guided meditation now to give you like a taste of our membership in the earth body. A direct, experience of that these bodies and the body of the planet are one process. Looked at, in a certain manner. If we look at it just with our, opening our eyes, we can see the skin, and we're on a conventional level, that's where our body ends. But if we look deeper, we can see, no, this body actually doesn't have an end, and is constantly in relationship with the biosphere through eating, drinking, breathing, and so on. So noticing again that the gravitational pull of the earth, which keeps us on our seats, if we are conscious of it or not. And wherever we sit on this planet, we always sit right above the center of it. So feeling, the blood pulsing, maybe in your hands or your neck, fingertips. So that's, the water element in the body. Which is, cycling automatically throughout the body. And this water element in our bodies is actually part of the larger water and mineral cycles of the region where we live, through drinking the water and going to the bathroom. So it doesn't really end, at the skin. it goes into the ground. And it comes up from the ground again. So we are part of that whole region where we live, the watershed. Just allowing that thought, that perception, to drop in. And there's a sense of, there's a recognition, this is really true. I never thought about that. And just as the blood, nourishes your body, water is the blood of the earth. There's a lot of water here in this region. It's beautiful to see the aliveness, the vitality of the land here and of the forests. It's quite different than where I come from, in California. And then, notice your breathing. Like the blood, it's also pulsing and mostly automatic. And, the oxygen, which we take in, and many other animals, is the gift of mostly of plankton, phytoplankton in the oceans, and also some percentage of it comes through green plant life on land. So as the plankton and the plants breathe in CO2 and then releasing oxygen as part of the process, how they convert, light into sugars, which we then eat when we eat vegetables. So they are able, to convert sunlight into food, which is very impressive, I would think. So just allowing that also to sink in, these different ways of intelligence. How plants, show up here. And what an important part they play for life on this planet to thrive. Our whole bodies are made from those elements, which are coming to us through the plants we eat and, the plants we wear, build our houses from. It's amazing, how utterly we are dependent on them. For them, to basically synthesize sunlight together with the minerals and waters of this planet into all of the things we have and we eat. So that's a really a very different way of using perception than usual. So as the earth, as the water is the blood of the earth, the air is the breath of the earth. And we are participating in it. And then we can also, sense the aliveness in the body, the vibrancy, our own energy body. Which is rising as we are breathing in and contracting a little bit as we are breathing out. Noticing the muscle tone, the energy which is released in the body, with every heartbeat. And sent out throughout the body. Comes to this body from the sun through the food we eat. So just, allowing that amazing mystery to touch our hearts. Giving a sense of wonder, a sense of awe in the midst of a time of great confusion and uncertainty. And they are both existing at the same time. So rather than getting lost in what doesn't work, we can bring a sense of balance and spaciousness by seeing it in this larger context. So, these bodies of ours, amid everything, we wear, and even our cell phones in our pockets, and the building with its chairs and tables and all of the food here, everything has emerged out of this living planet Earth and will go back into it. And there is no technology whatsoever which can change that. It can be dragged out, to a certain extent, of course. And just allowing that to land in us, like snow falling on a warm ground. Allowing it to just sink in without no need to sink. Just allowing it to sink in. And allowing the body to be rewired by this different way of looking. The feeling the discomfort, the uncertainty, the confusion, that's all okay, it's all part of it. And also the sense of awe and mystery. Which we really need now, in order to keep us moving and keep us open to what wants to be understood, to really stand under it and allow ourselves to be changed by it. And knowing, that we are doing this together. So, by really noticing the vulnerability of these earth bodies, totally dependent. And the receptivity and, the willingness to relinquish what doesn't work, the old paradigm of control and domination, and becoming a true member of this earth community. Which isn't just all about us, humans, but it's about much vaster process. And as we are sensing our own confusion and not knowing, we can extrapolate how it will be for others, who don't even have the leisure to meditate, maybe. Don't have the privilege to spend time like this because they need to work. Or they don't have access even to this kind of teaching. So, using the privilege we have to be part of this new paradigm to emerge into our communities, that we are part of a living, intelligent earth, and we can trust that. Because we will soon we'll eat food, and we're eating the earth, really. It's a beautiful food reflection which I actually learned from Ayya Bodhi. She learned it from Venerable Mahagosananda, a Cambodian monk. And he would say, I am earth and I'm eating earth. Understanding this, we understand all the teachings of the Buddha. I am earth and I'm eating earth. Understanding this, I understand all the teachings of the Buddha. Not with the head, not with the intellect, but with the whole being. And as we are letting that drop in, we can sense, how the resistance of the system, maybe the confusion, the contraction, the process of change. And we can, we have the Brahmaviharas as this very powerful practices in order to create space in the system. Metta, Karuna, Mudita and Upekkha. Whichever of those four you find helpful, with the in-breath really bringing up that Brahmavihara in the heart. And with the out-breath, allowing it to radiate out through your whole body and maybe even beyond the body. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. That's the slogan on compassion, Karuna. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. In a world, where there's so much confusion and polarization at this point. May all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. And now we can sit for a few more minutes and then I'm going to ring the bell.
Andamayam Dhammakatayu Sadhukaram Dharamase Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu anumodami. For those of you who are new, that means that was a great talk. Way to go. We have a chance now for questions and answers, and it's a very precious opportunity to be visited by a monastic such as Ayyā Santacitta, who I believe has been in robes for 25 to 30 years at this point in total. That's very rare in this world. More than 30, more than 30. So I just would encourage people to take advantage of that, and particularly her kind of speaking to the present moment and the shift that's at work. So feel free to raise your hand if you would like to say something. If you're on Zoom, raise your electronic hand and AV team will call on you. And if you're in person, just raise your normal hand and Miles will run a mic over to you. And questions can be directed towards all, but encouraging those to speak directly to Ayyā Santacitta more.
Thank you so much, Ayyā, for your talk and guidance and being here. I have a question about, I know you're involved in, I don't know if activism is the word you'd use, but kind of more engaged Buddhism maybe in the world. And I'm wondering how you relate to your time spent with that and keeping up with sort of current worldly things going on with the world and climate, and how that relates to sort of seclusion and just the ideas of the equanimity of this is samsara and there's suffering and it will all change, world contracts and expands, and kind of that macro Buddhist cosmology, and how that can relate, I guess. Thanks.
I've just been on Vita retreat, 1.5 months, so I just I have times on retreat, and then I have times on, I mostly teach in the way I've just been teaching, and so to keep the balance, and I think, to do both, to have time to study and to meditate, and be able to really settle down, and then go out and teach when I'm invited, and that's how I do it. Yeah, and also, I allow it also to emerge. The talents I have and the skills I have. Finding ways where I feel that resonates well. That's a good use of my time. And when I feel it's not, then I'm just not going to do it, And as I'm getting older, I have more capacity, to say no in a way. And I live mostly on my own now, or with just one person, so I don't live in a big community anymore, so I can have more agency how I'm going to use my time, And I've just lived over 30 years in community, and now, in order to be able to do what I want to do, or what I feel called to do, I had to also maybe step out, to become more, to kind of show up in a different way, and once that is more consolidated, I think I'm most likely going to be again in community, more. But when there's those times of when there's a lot of change going on, sometimes, one needs to move out of the old environment, because it's kind of a dynamic, which keeps you kind of in your old ways. It would be much more difficult. So to know, what's supportive for one's practice, and it's a learning process, yeah. And just, to keep the question alive, and then really, I think life supports our intentions. If we can really stay with that. This is at least my experience. It just takes often much longer than one thinks, as the monks will probably also know, but it's happening, yeah. Yeah.
Zoom question from Juan Philippe, please.
Hello, thank you, Ajahn. Thank you, Ayyā. I was drawn before the session to ask about what's it like to ordain coming from a non-Buddhist country when monasteries are very far away. And I think Ajah's story might be very luminous to that question. And maybe some of the Ajahns as well have a story in that way. Thank you very much.
How it was with me, I had my first contact with Buddhism in Thailand in the late 80s when I was traveling there. So stumbled into the monastery of my first teacher and really felt a sense of possibility. The way he was showing up, I found that very attractive. So I continued to go back and do retreats, and then one day a nun arrived there. Actually, she lives now in Seattle. Her name is Venerable Dhammadina. She's now in Tibetan robes, and she was a nun from the Burmese tradition at that time. She showed up, and then this was the first time that I saw a white woman in brown robes. So, and then I had this. There was the sense this is actually something one can do, because in Thailand there's only mostly mechis at that time. There were no bhikkhunis, so I've had that sense of feeling a little bit of a draw, in that direction, and that took me then to Amaravati Buddhist Monastery in England because I didn't want to be a mechi, and so then I went there, and there was an international community with Siladhara training, and then I became a Siladhara there and trained there for about 16 years. So one needs to travel, in order to find one's way. But it wasn't very difficult. And then, somehow at one point that training there had its limits, like everything does, So then I moved on together with Ayanana Bodhi, who now has a vihara in Port Townsend. And we came together on the invitation of the Āloka Foundation to America. And then we became bhikkhunis. And that's how it unfolded. So, and it's different for everyone. Yeah, and ordination isn't the answer to all problems. It just works for some people. So it's like some people are called to be hairdressers and others are called to be teachers, and others are called to be monastic. So it's not that special really in that sense. But for those, for those who have that kind of karma or whatever, it can be a great thing to do. And it seems to work for the three of us, right? Yeah. But it's not like an automatic recipe, for anything, really.
Thank you, Juan Felipe. I think that was a very good answer. And just to add, I do think when people first come in contact with the Dhamma, the sense of desiring to align one's life with it can be a very powerful force, and often that can manifest, I think, as a vision of robes. And if that does kind of manifest in the heart, whether or not conditions in your life are ripe for that, just really honoring that piece of your heart that orients towards the Dhamma, however that kind of vision is manifesting. And the analogy I use is really letting that aspiration gather sunlight, like a gem in the hand, but not to take it as an indication that you have to, as Ayyā said, ordain. It's definitely not a recipe for everyone. But that one thing I think is worth encouraging for everyone, really, who's able, is to go visit monasteries. A lot of people have the aspiration to ordination come up in the heart, or perhaps have had a dharmic path which has mainly been retreat. And to know that there's something very precious about time spent at monasteries. There's a holistic path, an ancient language of symbol, ritual, embodiment, and that kind of sterile, narrow focus on just meditation, which can be so problematic for so many, has a chance to kind of widen and blossom in the monastery into the full Noble Eightfold Path in a way that's ancient and nourishing. So Abhayagiri opens up in a few weeks, April 1st. You can email him, tell him Ajahn Nisapo and Ajahn Kovilo sent you, as long as you behave yourselves. And you can stay for a week. There's Dhammadharini, there's Birkin, there's other places, but really just encouraging people to go visit monasteries, and whether or not you ordain, at least you'll have access to that piece of your heart and of practice. Sravasti Abbey is also great there near Spokane. Mary, please.
Thank you, Ajahn. Thank you, Ayyā, for the beautiful talk. It's wonderful to sit with you again. I wanted to clarify something that you mentioned at the very end, which was, may all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. In my contemplation of the world today, it seems that harm is being done, but not necessarily with the intention to harm. People actually think that these things might be beneficial. And so it's more the approach that you were mentioning, the domination and the control, that seems to be the power play that is stopping things. So my question is really about how to approach this. It seems to me that your approach, how to speak to this, how to act towards this dynamic of domination. And from your talk, I gathered that the approach that I heard in there was consciousness raising. Just that early movement of bringing things up to be seen in a different way. Is that a way to speak to this domination? Thank you.
I mean, it's part of it, yeah. That's part of it. And then, from this consciousness, which is having, maybe a different perception and perspective on what's really happening, then depending on our situation and our skills, different possibilities for action can be, identified, of course. Some, the agency has then to be translated into action, and that will be different for everyone. But there's different, definitely, and one need to do something, not just sit on the cushion. But if that's done really in a heartful way, the momentum to act, will become so strong. And then ways will open up, And there's just one organization which I'd like to actually, put out there. If anyone is interested, they have a website and they are called Indivisible. An organization which is very clear about that if we allow ourselves to be divided into polarization, that will be not helpful, So I suggest people look at that. There's ways, to get involved in meaningful action. And there's many other ways, But this is something you have to find out for yourself. If you're really practicing and really nourishing this intention, it will find a way, But this is not something I can give to you, but you have to go through the pains of finding out for yourself, because it's a trial and error thing. It might take some time to really find a place which is really congruent, for you. But this is the dana here, this is the generosity to go through the messiness of finding what's your contribution and doing it, in Sangha and discussing it with others, because you're not the only person who doesn't know maybe what to do and, feels the hopelessness and the helplessness. But then if you speak it out, that's already the next step, And it's messy. It's dukkha, just like everything else.
Thank you so much for that answer, for the kind answer, and for the allowing of the receptivity and the time to find the appropriate.
Thank you very much for coming and for your talk, Ayyā. Appreciate it. A question for all of you is anger, from a Buddhist frame, is anger ever justified? Especially in relation to maybe political action, what's happening to the world?
I mean, it depends, how you define anger, If you speak, I speak about anger energy, it's just like one way how emotions can manifest in the body. And then what we do with that energy, there's things which are skillful and others which are unskillful, to channel it. So I think anger energy, the fire energy, without that, it'd be impossible to do anything much, isn't it? So it's important to have that energy of knowing, if something is causing harm and trying to change that, to limit it, to stop it, to channel it in a more skillful way. I think that's a good thing, But if you send that energy into polarizing and blaming and so on, then that would be not good. That would not be helpful, But shutting down that fire, would be a waste, because then we don't have any energy to get up and do something, So, for example, when I was, just a little example, when I was in the monasteries in England, where I have learned and benefited so much, from the Ajahn Chah lineage, but then at one point I hit the glass ceiling, of patriarchy, which became unacceptable, as I became older and more, took on more responsibility and so on. And that definitely, was like a powerful kind of thing to hit against, for some time. And then I was like working with that energy. I wasn't like immediately going with the sledgehammer and knocking down the monastery, but I was finding a way, how I could find a way out, so I can use that energy in a more beneficial way. And that then, the world responded suddenly, by the Āloka Foundation inviting me and another body, and then giving us a place to stay in America. And then we got invited by Spirit Rock and IMS and by all of those centers. And then suddenly, we had a lot of exposure to people, and then they really liked what we were doing, and ding, 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 and that's how it worked. Without that initial fire energy, I would have just stayed there and get depressed, and go down, down, down. But I didn't act out. Sometimes I said things, which were offensive to people, I'm sure, but it was in bounds, I'm still in ropes, So, yeah. So we need the energy, and it doesn't need to be harmful, And if we swallow it down, it can make us sick, really. We harm ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you, Ayyā. Yeah, that speaking to the fire and the value of that, the inner wanting to bring about wholesomeness, bring about goodness, that's so important. And it's so interesting in the Pali language, things are so much more cut and dry. Like dosa, the Pali word for anger, it's always unwholesome. It's a negative mind state, which is going to hurt yourself and hurt other people. Whereas, yeah, in English, you talk about, righteous indignation, and it's a mixed up term. And it comes with the fire, which wants to do something to bring about change. And another aspect is, say, critical realism. Like the English word being critical, it comes up with, you're seeing there's an aspect of the English word anger, which does have this critical, clear-seeing edge to it. But we want to cultivate that clarity and the energy, the heat energy, but without all of the afflictive and harmful spite, which is the emotion and the weight that comes behind so much of our emotional anger. So preserving the good parts of that criticalness and letting aside all of the unhelpful and hurtful aspects. Yeah, please.
And sometimes, making mistakes and then, just apologizing or repair. We can repair, because if you're so scared, to make a mistake, we also might not, not dare to do anything. That would also be not so good, So one can make a mistake and then, repair it, learn from that. That's also part of the path, Remorse and, kind of, even, in our monastic discipline, we have rituals for, apologizing, isn't it, and asking for forgiveness and so on, because it's part of the path, We are not born like perfect. I mean, in one way we are perfect, but, the way how we show up, and that's okay too, I think. That's how we learn. Yeah. And and the word chanda, is aspiration, or, to have a desire for a wholesome, showing up in a wholesome way, is also a word is a different word. It's called chanda, and maybe Ayyā Chanda has visited here, your Sangha. Yeah, she has that name. So that's also, there needs to be some kind of energetic movement of wanting to do something good, otherwise we won't do it. How would you ever have come here today without wanting to come here? We would be an empty hall already.
May I say one final thing, and then I think we have to just also, I think that is something a lot of us practitioners brush up against is, the acknowledgement that within the experience of initial anger or outrage, there's really necessary and wholesome elements of like knowing something should be addressed, knowing that action should be taken. And I think the Buddhist perspective is and maybe some of those could be pointed to as the anger energy, or just sort of, kind of the need for something to do something. But I think where Buddhism really draws a line is that when that manifests as anger, and there's that sense of needing to, from a place of reactivity, jump into something, that's where there's never a place for expression of anger as such, of dosa. And I'm reminded, like, we had a furnace at a Biography, and you'd put in wood, and the smoke would circle back down and incinerate again and again, and it would heat really, it would get to extreme heat, and it would burn off all the extra smoke, so what came out of the furnace would be clean. And I think that's a good analogy for how we work with angers. Like, you can watch the experience arise, but as a practitioner, knowing, like, never acting from that place of burning reactivity, heat, holding it internally to the point where we, in a few hours or minutes or days, usually there'll be a place where the smoke and the grit and, like, the leaping flame has settled enough that you're able to discern the wholesome elements and act from that place that's quieter, calm, and has a gentle warmth to it. So, yeah, I think, a lot of it's semantics and working with, like, what does anger mean versus anger energy, or wholesome desire to make change. But I think that's something we do have to navigate. Ayyā Santacittā is one of the best for that, by the way. She was one of the first to give me clear guidelines for how we could skillfully interact with the Bhikkhuni sisters in our lives. It meant a lot.